When do you fucking fall into Summer House?
So Summer House came about, I learned about this whole opportunity with Kyle, who was a friend of mine.
How did you know him?
I met him in the Hamptons the previous summer.
You're just hanging out.
I'd get a table at a nightclub, or, I'd roll with a big group of friends. My mom got remarried, and there was a kind of a debate about how many people could come to the wedding at that time. Because of COVID, you couldn't have more than like 20 people in a place in some states and cities. So there was a big debate about my brother attending the wedding, and he ultimately didn't attend the wedding.
Like, what kind of behaviors did your brother have, and what kind of outcomes from the behavior?
I mean, just fighting with my parents. My brother and my dad got into it a fair amount.
What was his name?
Curtis.
And what was the experience of being on a reality show? How old were you when it started?
1, 2, 3.
I have to apologize to you, Carl. I want to start this interview with an apology. Normally, when we shoot Dopey, it's not like this. It's not this big production. Usually it's very easy, and I'm sorry for Howie.
It's all good.
And I want to welcome you, Carl Radke. And from Summer House, you said you're used to these kinds of cameras.
I am. I'm actually these little cameras that move around and kind of track. It's almost like a surveillance camera, which is good. I'm used to it.
Is it terrifying to live in that situation?
I don't think it's terrifying. It's, I think, a little, I think at first it takes a little adjustment. And when I first entered that house, I would say alcohol was a big help for making you feel more comfortable. But you kind of forget about them after a little bit.
Yeah, that's the big question. Is like, I mean, I've been watching Summer House, and there's a lot of questions. But first, I want to thank you for coming to my father's apartment. I know. Can you imagine a reality show shot in an old Jewish man's apartment in Chelsea? Could you see that?
I could. You can call it
Crusty Jew. Old and crusty.
Crusty house.
Crusty house. Yeah, it could work. And I remember, like, we talked once, and I misspoke, and I called Summer House Sober House, and you were like, it definitely is not that.
A sober house. I mean, it's a great house, but there's definitely a lot of partying, and that was the whole kind of concept when we first started. Was we were doing this kind of thing in the Hamptons, renting a house with our best friends, putting all of our money together, and getting after it in the summer, having a great weekend, meeting people, partying, hooking up, and then going right back to your job, Monday through Friday. So it was like it was a work-life balance show that I thought, I could just do it on the weekends and have fun.
Were you a Hamptons guy before?
I was, actually. I had done some summer houses and been out there previously to ever, being a TV show. My mom actually had told me she spent time in Montauk in the 70s. She was kind of a hippie.
Montauk is amazing.
Artsy person, and there was a theater out there that used to have like kind of little plays and shows, and she would go out there in the 70s. So I feel like I was always destined to be out there in some way.
And like, I want to know so much stuff. You're from Pittsburgh.
I was born in Chicago, but Pittsburgh is where I grew up. We moved from Chicago to Pittsburgh when I was about 5. But my formative years, I was in Pittsburgh, and I love both cities, but Pittsburgh is where I claim.
Really?
I do.
But you've really planted quite a flag in New York City and the Hamptons.
I have planted a flag here. Well, I went to Syracuse University. So when I went to college, I'd had a dream of either being in New York City or living in LA.
That's when the dream kind of started?
Even before, actually. I knew in high school, I used to love SportsCenter and ESPN, Stuart Scott, Chris Berman, and I always thought I could be maybe like a SportsCenter anchor. And
I could see that.
In high school, we had a TV station or a television studio where students would do the morning announcements. Kids would record like the soccer game and then announce it like we're talking right now. So I love the television studio. I did a lot of editing and filming. I did some on-camera work. We made stupid videos. But it was there that I asked my guidance counselor in high school. I said, I want to go to like a television film school.
So it's Newhouse School of Communications in Syracuse.
She wrote down a couple names: Syracuse University, NYU, University of Southern California, Ohio University, and maybe one other one I'm forgetting. But I had family who was like, oh, Syracuse. And I loved basketball. And I was like, I knew, Jim Boeheim, I knew the Big East. So I was like, okay, they have a good education and big sports. maybe that's where.
When were you in Syracuse?
I got there the year after Carmelo Anthony won the national.
That was the big question. So Melo was gone.
I kind of joke, but my mom and I visited the campus right after they won the national championship, and I joke that there was like mattresses still on fire, and Marshall Street. Anybody who's went to Syracuse knows Marshall Street. It was like, I mean, a post Mardi Gras bomb went off. And I was like, this is where I want to go. Like, this is going to be great. Like, big time sports. They just won the national championship, fraternities, sororities, bars. Like, I was like, this is.
And Syracuse was high on its own supply at that point.
Oh,
right?
Syracuse is like a culmination of, you got a lot of, it's a very diverse school, which was why I wanted to go there. But there weren't a lot of kids from Pittsburgh that Syracuse, I got a crash course in what Jewish camp was.
Right.
First weekend at Syracuse, everybody's like, what camp were you in? I'm like, what, basketball?
Well, you could pass.
Camp?
You could pass for Jewish very easily.
Well, a friend joked, a Jewish friend of mine, he called it Syra Jews.
Right.
Which I thought was pretty funny. But no, I mean, it was awesome to be integrated with a bunch of New Yorker, Upper East Side kids. My roommate was from Upper East Side. Another roommate from McKinney, Texas. But then you had kids from Boston, Jersey, Long Island.
And it definitely like lays the path to Summer House. You know what I mean? It's like, it's TV, it's like rich New York people,
Yep.
It's partying. It's actually like, and it's funny the way our destiny is so formed by all these little things that happen along the way.
100%.
Like you're into TV, but you have no idea that you're going to wind up on this ridiculously huge reality show. And like Carl and I talk here and there, it's like, and we have some mutual friends,
Yep.
and you get fucking spotted wherever you go. Is that hard? Is that weird? And then we got to go back to the great roots of why you're a fucked up addict in recovery.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is a little weird sometimes. At the same point, I mean, I've had a lot of people to give me good advice. It's a small price to pay for that kind of awkwardness or weirdness when you're in public.
It's a bargain.
If you are able to impact people or help other people or do something good for others, I feel like I have been able to make an impact and connect with some people, whether it's through sharing some of my own story. My brother who's passed from a overdose, which was a part of an episode of Summer House. So yes, it's awkward and weird sometimes, but once that stops happening, then I'll be like, wait, what happened here? So I appreciate it, but I will say, like, yeah, it makes living in New York sometimes as a 6'5" guy, I stand out. And sometimes if I'm going just for a work thing or interviewing someone for my new business soft bar, I'm on a date and paparazzi was there. And like, I'm not complaining. Trust me. It's just, it brings about some different things that took a lot of time to kind of adjust to.
It's challenging. And I would imagine newly sober, it was really hard, or in the horrible, tumultuous breakup, it was very hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's
newly sober. It's like you have new skin.
It was hard. I mean, what's funny is if I think about before I got sober, I was written up in Page Six. I got into an argument at Tom and Jerry's in Soho with a girl, and I was really fucked up. And I had a reason why I was yelling at this person. We got into an argument and it made the news.
Was it Leah McSweeney?
It was not.
Okay.
But the next day I got a call from someone at the network saying, what's going on? And I didn't even know what happened. So yeah, like my behavior was really bad at times. And like I was doing shit in public and didn't even know was happening. So once I did get sober, yes, it was nerve-wracking because I felt like everybody still had eyeballs on me. And even holding up a water or anything in my hands in public, I had anxiety about it. Even if I had a non-alcoholic beer, like a Heineken Zero, and I was holding in my hand, and I like made sure they saw the label.
Well, it's the opposite. It's
I
like
just thought I was going to be.
It's like before all that, you were like, you had no idea that people noticed you, and now the only thing is, oh my God, everybody is watching me at every second.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's watching me at every second, and then oh my God, they know that I'm an alcoholic and a coke addict. Oh my God, they know I'm like this crazy person, or they.
It's not the best way to get sober, but it is like it's like being a kid who can't swim and getting thrown in the pool.
And sometimes that's how you learn, is like jumping in or kind of thrusting yourself into it. And I kind of didn't have a choice my sober journey, it was a long time coming, quite frankly, but it wasn't until early January of 2021 is when as I described, hit rock bottom. Now I didn't crash a car. I didn't do anything other than like scare a bunch of people and hurt myself. You know, I drank like 6 bottles of red wine and did about, I don't remember how many, but it was like these little jars of blow that.
All right, don't jump ahead. Let's go back.
Okay.
To young Carl in
young
Pittsburgh.
Carl.
When is the first time you use or drink and notice it?
The first time I drank, I remember having a Budweiser out of my dad's hand when I was maybe 8 or 9. In my family, like, we're a big family. Social hour, happy hour was always a thing. My grandfather loved to drink. I loved that man. He was an amazing guy. But, you know, at a certain point, everybody knew if he had a couple martinis, get out of the way. He was a Vietnam veteran. He worked as a steel worker, but also then kind of rose up in the ranks at U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh. So tough, scary guy, but very loving and amazing. But alcohol definitely was a factor in his life. But it wasn't until I was in high school, like most kids, you go to a house party. I remember drinking a Milwaukee Best Light, and I got really sick. And I remember thinking, who the fuck drinks this stuff? It tasted horrible. I mean, Milwaukee Best isn't the greatest either, but I didn't like it. And I was really focused on school. I was in student council. I was on some of the athletic teams. My brother had a lot of challenges still at that point. He was alcohol.
How much older was your brother?
5 years older.
And what was he doing at that point?
When he was in high school, when he was 15 or 16, I was 10 or 11, and he was coming home smoking weed. I remember him at one point having, and then obviously alcohol and just partying and behavioral stuff. So I was always witness to these things as a younger kid, and then as I got into high school, was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do the opposite.
Right.
I don't want to be like him.
What did you see? Like, what kind of behaviors did your brother have, and what kind of outcomes from the behavior? I
mean, just fighting with my parents. My brother and my dad got into it a fair amount.
What was his name?
Curtis. So Curtis and Carl. But my brother, he was a great athlete. But then as the started to take over, the sports and all that stuff became a total afterthought. So there was police activity at the house frequently. Not frequently, like every day, but I remember vividly a birthday party, or actually it wasn't my mom corrected me later. There is some revisionist history, I will say. And even remember, I did a lot of coke. I drank a shit ton.
I don't remember anything. But
what I recall, and I shared this with my mom and she kind of corrected it, but when I was 11 or 12, I had some friends over on a weekend watching football. And my brother had been in some trouble the night before. He basically was involved in like a convenience store situation. I don't want to call it a robbery, but they stole stuff. He ran. So the next day, we're at our house. I'm having some close friends of mine, and I'm like 11. And a knock at the door mid-birthday or mid-party. It wasn't a birthday, I thought it was. And it was 5 police officers, and they had a warrant to search the house. So my brother gets handcuffed in front of me and all my guy friends, and like it was very just traumatic, the whole thing.
So it wasn't like your brother's listening to Pink Floyd and he's cool and you're like...
He was listening to Pink Floyd, actually, which is why I've always had an affinity for music. But my brother, I think he struggled with some mental illness. I think there were some things from his childhood he never really came to grips with. And then, alcohol and psychedelics, and then ultimately, and other barbiturates became his friend. But early on, it was the weed, the drinking, the coke.
And you see it from your vantage, and you're like, I do not want to be like my brother.
100%. People in town and where we're from, people knew about his behavior, and I would walk around almost kind of how I walk around a little bit sometimes in New York, like worried but I would walk around like that in school because I'm like, oh, everybody knows my brother has struggled. And
did you have a reputation because of your brother's reputation?
I did a little bit, yeah. But it was quickly, I was able to kind of show that I was a little different than that, or...
Well, you made sure.
I really tried to do the opposite and prove to people that, I wasn't quite like him. And listen, my family, like, I get a hard time sometimes. Like, we weren't poor, we weren't rich. My parents both worked 2 jobs. My dad, my mom, they provided for us.
What did they do?
My mom worked as an executive assistant at like a nonprofit. She also worked part-time at Weight Watchers. She actually lost a ton of weight after she had me in the 80s, she lost like 70 pounds.
Wow.
And from Weight Watchers, and then later went to work there part-time. My dad worked for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which is a newspaper, our New York Times in Pittsburgh. He worked in distribution for them. He delivered papers, and also worked part-time at...
So we're talking about a hardworking Pittsburgh family.
Blue collar,
Yeah.
I shoveled driveways, I cut grass. You know, my parents provided. I was lucky, but at the same time, like everything wasn't silver spoon. You know, it was, we had a lot of religion in our family. We did a lot of church, but at the same time, you know, family was what held us together.
And how close were you with your brother? Like, when was the last time you remember, when were you closest with him?
I mean, when we were younger, I felt we were close. But 5 years is significant.
Yeah, my kids are 8 years apart.
5 years is a lot, but no, I always looked up to him. He was my hero. You know, he was a great athlete. He was a great baseball player. His musical taste, I always just wanted him to, I just wanted to be liked by him and loved by him. And he was hard.
Accepted by him.
He was hard on me like brothers are, but he also was my biggest supporter too.
Talk about like the parallel lines of his using and your using. Because it sounds like
Very
you're like
similar.
Okay.
Maybe different levels of, you know, I mean, we're all the same, really. But I think I kind of had a, you know, judgment of him because I'm thinking, oh, well, he's way worse than I am. I just drank a little bit and just do a little coke, but I can turn it back off and go to work. And
I'm not like my brother.
I'm not like him. And, you know, my brother, it's weird. Like this may sound weird, but he looked different than I did. Like he was very, let's say, earthy. He had dreadlocks. He had long hair.
He was a big hippie.
Super hippie. Then you have me, clean cut kid.
Was he very tall too, though?
6'1", 6'2". Clean cut. Like I just presented myself much differently, even though behind the scenes I was drinking a lot and was doing hard. So like you have the very same story underneath, but the exterior looked very different.
It's funny though, like, because your brother sounds like a classic Dopey listener.
He would have loved listening to Dopey.
And
had he gotten more sober.
And it sounds like you fucking saw him and it's like, oh my God, I can imagine going down this road and I don't want to.
100%. I mean, I can remember my brother picking me up, giving me rides to practice, and the car, I mean, stunk like pot. He had a fish tape that he had gotten at some concert in Hampton Roads, Virginia.
Yeah.
You know, day 4 of the 8-day fucking crazy fish shows. And this is no shade at Fish. They're an incredible band.
Right.
But I mean, I remember showing up to like a practice, like smelling like cigarettes and weed just from him giving me a ride to practice.
Were you worried about him?
Always. Yeah, I think it was after, I mean, when I saw him get arrested, that was like a shock. After that point, you know, we did family therapy. It's my first time ever going to therapy was my mom, my dad, and my brother, and then a therapist in downtown Pittsburgh. And talking about all the things that my brother, you know, just trying to come together as a family to better help him and support each other. But it was from that moment of the arrest when I was like 11, I mean, just ups and downs constantly. So we were always worried about him.
So like as a junior and a senior in high school, you're smoking weed too?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
You didn't smoke weed?
No.
You didn't smoke weed till college?
Not until college. Not even until senior year of college.
So you avoided weed like the plague?
It wasn't a thing. Like I would maybe occasionally, if someone was like, pass a joint, I might take a hit, but it wasn't, I actually didn't like it. I didn't like the way it made me feel. It made me very paranoid. It made me feel out of my body. And that really didn't shift until, like I said, senior year of college, because I had some roommates that were very, very intelligent, very like smart, had good grades, and they actually were smoking weed. And I was like, and then they actually like started educating me more on some things about weed. And that's when I started smoking a little bit more, but not, I didn't smoke every morning or every day. You know, it was like a weekend or fun social thing.
And what about alcohol? Like when does alcohol become, like, is it in high school that you're like?
High school was like kind of like lays the groundwork. You know, in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, you know, underage drinking is a common thing, or it was back then. But that's kind of where it stopped. There wasn't other substances, maybe weed. But there wasn't coke. This isn't New York City. Like all the kids in New York City, I feel like, are doing coke at 13 when they go to the club. In Pittsburgh,
I bet there's a crazy crack scene. in Pittsburgh right now, though.
I bet there is. There actually is a crazy crack scene, sadly, and a meth scene.
But that wasn't the high school football scene.
No, the high school thing
right?
was for us was booze.
Yeah.
And maybe a little weed. But it wasn't until I got to Syracuse University and joined a fraternity. And I'm not blaming my fraternity for this. I loved the guys at my fraternity.
I support blaming anybody else you can for your addiction. I blame my parents constantly. Somebody just wrote me an email suggesting that I make financial restitution to my father. Can you believe that? And I got scared because for a second I was like,
Am I getting sued by my dad?
No, am I going to? Like, do I have to make financial amends to my father? No, I don't. Do I?
I don't know. I don't think you have to.
The person who wrote the email was suggesting.
Sounds like they need to make financial restitution to someone in their life, and they're projecting it onto you.
I historically blame him for my heroin addiction because I think it's funny, and it's partially true. Come on.
Yeah.
But they were saying that maybe I should pay back rehab money to him.
I've thought about that with my dad and how as I've gotten older and our relationship has gotten a lot better, I actually view that as a way of like, it's now my turn to support him in a way and contribute to his life, just like he did in ways that I wasn't at the time able to repay him for. But I think that's how like it can come full circle in a way with if you have a relationship with your parents where you're able to maybe contribute and step up. It doesn't maybe have to be as formal. Hey, Dad, I'm contributing restitution
I
to
take
you.
so much advantage of my father. We're in his apartment right now. We're in his kitchen right now.
Well, he's paying it forward for us.
My father is a very wonderful man.
Well, if it is his fault for your heroin addiction, this is why he's deep down. He's giving us this opportunity.
This is his amend.
Yes, he's making amends back.
He is making an impact on the Dopey Nation.
I love it. Well, thank you, Dad, for letting us.
I cannot wait till you meet him at DopeyCon. He's a trip. But you're not going to lie, you didn't enjoy drinking in high school.
I didn't. I mean, if I'm really going to be honest, in high school it was a social thing. It was what the cool kids were doing, and I wanted to fit in. I wanted to fit in with everybody else. It was like definitely like a cool thing to do. It was a little bit of like how like our mysterious kind of way of doing something that our parents didn't know about.
Right.
But trust me, like those hangovers I had early on, and even I remember vividly throwing up in toilets and being like, why am I doing this? And there was no use at that point. It was just like Milwaukee Best. But it really was in Syracuse when I joined a fraternity my freshman year. I pledged in the fall, even though you're supposed to pledge in the spring. I met a group of guys one of my second weekends at Syracuse, and I felt like I hit it off, and I was like, these guys feel like I fit in, and they asked me if I wanted to pledge.
Every Syracuse story I've ever heard has Coke in it.
100%.
How cokey? Why isn't it so Coke-accused? Syracoke.
I mean, great question. I mean, I have two theories. One, the confluence of all these New York kids that come to Syracuse. It's kind of like Syracuse or New York. Syracuse is New York's university.
Okay.
In a way.
Right.
It's the largest.
The campus.
Just like the level of people, the professions that come out of Syracuse, the sports, the alumni. But a lot of them are coming from New York City, which in my opinion, you have more of an early adoption to than maybe other cities. Also, there's a large Indian reservation in upstate New York. And from what I've learned, and even just some of these random like news articles you hear about these busts, a lot of come from Canada and also these Indian reservations. So I think there's also, just because of college campuses, people know they can unload a lot of in upstate New York.
It's crazy because like my wife and one of my best friends who died would go to Syracuse and score Coke. And I hear so many fucking Coke Syracuse stories. When you get into the frat, are people doing Coke?
Yeah, it was definitely like, it wasn't like outwardly like in the middle of the table. Everybody, it was like the cool guys' room in the back. You knew that that's where it was going on. And a lot of the sororities too. I mean, like the cute girls, the fun girls, they were all partaking, but it seemed at that time like just a fun party thing and not like we're staying up till 8 a.m. It was like a couple bumps before going to the frat party. And
were there any like Coke casualties in college, or was it real chill?
This may sound bad. I don't recall of any casualties that were Coke related. I mean, I think there were some other maybe alcohol related.
It doesn't sound bad to me. I mean,
drinking and driving still on college campuses is horrible. I myself drank and drive, and I'm not proud of it, but I think that was probably the bigger issue on campus was drinking and driving. But as I think the world has evolved and Coke has evolved. I mean, I'm sure now it's the fentanyl and the street bullshit that's going on up there.
Totally. I mean, and I think there's a shit ton of people, me included. Like, I was in college, I was smoking weed every day, I was taking hallucinogens whenever I could. I did Coke a couple of times, like I did pills a couple of times, but I didn't have an issue with anything except weed. Really, I had a crazy weed compulsion to smoke weed. So to talk about Syracuse and to talk about that there weren't casualties, it's like, thank God, like everybody who does isn't a fucking addict. Thank God they can get it. Some people can have, normal people can do Coke, enjoy it, and then go on with their life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was some people that, you know, have maybe perished from it, sadly. But as far as I recall, nobody really in my circle. But I mean, trust me, like since I've gotten sober, it's funny actually the amount of people that I've reconnected with that I used to do a lot of, you know, Coke with and drink with.
And they got sober?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
that's when I know we're in the right place.
Right. 100%. And so you're in college, you're in the frat, you're drinking, you're doing some Coke. And what's your brother up to?
So my brother was, you know, in Pittsburgh. He at times was a union bricklayer. So he worked very blue collar, hardworking job. So he was making decent money, but the bricklaying and construction, as anybody might understand, is very taxing on your body. So he started to kind of dip into painkillers.
He was also like a big hippie weirdo, and
was
they
a
all
hippie
wound
guy,
up
but
on Oxycontin.
It was funny, like as for a hippie guy, he was also like super tough and alpha and strong and not afraid. Like my brother was fearless. And for as hippie as he was on one side, he had this other, like, he was, you know, you could have fit him in a construction site here in New York, no problem, and he would have fit right in.
Right.
You know, just like a little bit rougher, tougher, but he still had this kind of hippie, earthy vibe to him.
It sounds like a cool guy.
He was a cool guy. I mean, I miss my brother every day. And I think, you know, part of what I think what like we're very similar, but we're so different. It was like the exterior was so like uniquely different. Like I was just a lot more clean cut and preppy and put together. He was just not, the opposite. Like he had holes in his shirts. He didn't shower. He didn't, missing underwear. He at one point didn't have the bottom to his shoes, and at a fish concert developed trench foot.
Trench foot,
which is like a wartime term in military. when you're in a wet marsh, or your boots are so soggy and muddy, and then your foot inside, it starts to develop what they call trench foot. It's like pruning times 10.
right?
Like, you know, when you're taking a bath and you're in too long.
Yeah,
like horrible. And he went to the hospital from that. Like he just would have these kind of ups and downs. He'd be good for a bit. He'd get arrested. He would be good for a bit, get arrested, go to rehab.
And how aware of his using were you at that point?
Through my parents, also because he would reach out to me for money.
As a kid, in college.
Oh yeah. And
how did you have money though?
I was always, I mean, I worked a little bit.
He'd be like, "Hey, Carl, can you throw me a couple $100 bucks?
$50.
Right.
Small amounts.
Right.
I mean, he stole stuff from us too. I mean, I don't want to highlight. I mean, from what I recall, I mean, my bike, my television, my Nintendo 64.
So he developed a serious opiate habit.
Absolutely. We always would joke. I mean, around Christmas, we would come home to I would come home for Christmas in college, and I'd look at our DVD collection. We'd pop in Elf or Home Alone or whatever Christmas movie. And one Christmas, I went home and I went to go look for the DVDs, and they were all gone.
Yeah.
I said, "Dad, where did the DVDs go?" And he's like, "Where do you think?" "They're at the corner," which was in our town. There was like a buy used CDs, DVDs shop. And I went in there, actually, and half of our shit was in there. I went to Play It Again Sports, which is like a sports store, but they do buy used sporting goods. So you can go there and get a baseball glove or a baseball bat that's been used.
And you're like, get your glove out of the box.
I went in there in my skis and my boots.
Did you buy them back?
I did. It was...
I was like that. Like that was the person I was. I'd come here, I'd take shit, I'd sell it, I would borrow money from my parents' neighbors, then I'd have them pay it back and have them give me twice as much money, so I'd pay it back and then keep half the money. I can relate to this stuff.
Yeah, and
just so we're clear.
No, and it was at the time I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I was really angry at my brother because it felt like I was just getting stolen from, disrespected, lied to.
Totally.
And I developed a big animosity and anger towards my brother and really distanced myself and just focused on my own selfishness in my own world and kind of.
But you're a kid and you're trying to make your way in college, and like your brother's a full-blown addict,
Yep.
and you're 5 years younger than him.
Yep.
I wouldn't call that selfish. I would call that living your life.
Yeah, I guess looking back on it, part of me wishes maybe I had the foresight or balls to kind of reach out to him in some ways or try to share how much I cared for him and loved him. Less, fuck you, you're a piece of shit, don't call me anymore.
Did it get to that point?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Because he descended and you were ascending, and you were probably scared, resentful, annoyed.
for sure. And then I graduated from Syracuse in 2007. I was able to finish college in 4 years. I got a good GPA. I was really proud of it. I partied in college. I had a good time, but I was there to get a good education, get good grades. But once I graduated, that's when life like set in. And, I should earmark this because my senior year, I was starting to struggle a little bit with like focusing and like getting shit done. And obviously Adderall was a big thing. So I went to the psychologist on campus at Syracuse and was prescribed 20 milligrams of Adderall.
Nice.
Which actually out of the gate was unbelievable. It like really helped me educationally, like focus on work, really get things done. But then I started to realize, you could take this on a weekend when you're day drinking. And that's when I fell in love with that feeling.
That stimulant alcohol mix.
Absolutely.
So, and also like,
That's when I really like Adderall is what I had done Coke first, but Adderall to me in that first time or a couple of times was like a long sustained high. It was like a more like just poignant Coke high than like you blow a couple lines. Yeah, you feel it, but then you're back down maybe 20 minutes later.
I missed out on Adderall big time. I missed out on it.
I joke it's basically laboratory cocaine.
I did a little bit of Ritalin in college, and I really liked it. And I smoked so much weed that it was like a weird, shitty speedball, but I liked it. And I never like pursued it. I never pursued stimulants. Tell us more about your college before you get out of college. I know there's some good shit in college. Like you said, you actually started to enjoy weed a little bit at that point.
So so I had gotten prescribed my senior year Adderall. I was definitely like having more fun and dipping my toe into smoking more weed. But still, I remember thinking like I would smoke on the weekend, and then during the week was like very focused on my education. I was on the practice team for basketball with the women's team, so they like had a men's group. So I like was at a basketball practice a couple days a week. I was on the men's club volleyball team. I was a really good athlete, so I was always like very active and in shape and doing that stuff. But I was always obsessed with like making money or hustling. So I, in college, would buy Air Jordan sneakers. This is at the time when Jordans were just being re-released as retros.
Yeah, the red ones.
The
classics.
Jordan 1s, 2s,
Yeah.
Jordan 1s through like 11. They were re-releasing. I'd go to Foot Locker in Syracuse at the Carousel Mall when they would drop, get a couple sizes, then sell them on eBay and make a little bit of profit. Started doing that on eBay in college, and then my senior year, some of my friends came together and were like, we could buy a bunch of weed from this Indian reservation, flip it, and basically make money and smoke for free. So I was like,
I thought you were going to say make money and then buy a bunch of Jordans and flip those.
well, that's why I ended up buying sneakers with some of the proceeds. But long story short, I got talked into driving to an Indian reservation and doing a pretty big weed deal in college. We bought, I don't remember how many, it was pounds. And my friend joked it was like brick pack.
It was a big garbage bag full of pot.
Basically, but it was like brick pack. It looked like
All that swag, compressed
was-
weed that was in some tire driven up
some
from
garbage,
Florida.
trim.
Right? Yeah.
But we were college kids, so we broke it down. We put it in little bags and we sold it through our friends. And I mean, it was funny. I mean, we basically made our money back, smoked for free, and then made extra dollars. And funny enough, we did buy sneakers with them, but we didn't sell them on eBay.
And did you fall in love with bud then?
Honestly, no. Weed always made me feel weird. And I didn't love how I was out of body at times. But it again, my understanding and knowledge of weed at that point was still like, it's just weed. Like I didn't get some of the other particulars of it. even how you take it, whether it's smoking or my roommates did bong hits. So
I took bong hits every day for like 20 years.
Yeah, I've done bong hits, but it got me too fucked up.
Yeah, I would live with this kid, and every morning he'd wake up and he'd pack the bong and he'd say, "Ruin your day," and I'd be like, "Yes, please," and that was reality.
I had a roommate after college that was like that, but he worked as a cameraman on a
show called Summer House.
Another show, but
right.
Yeah, he was fully functional.
Were you ever selling the Adderall?
Yeah, here and there. If anything, I was buying it because I couldn't get it. I would take my prescription through because I was taking on times I wasn't supposed to, and then I would be running out, and then but at that point, it didn't feel like you're dealing. It was just like, oh, I got a friend who's got a script.
And it was just one weed deal, not a lot of Adderall selling. But
no, with the weed, which I thought was cool at the time, which was what separated us from others, we were accepting PayPal.
Nice.
So you could pay like digitally back then. And this is, trust me, 2006, 2007.
That's how I sell Dopey hats.
Venmo wasn't a thing then. Yeah. And yeah, PayPal was a digital thing then, but you could accept some payments through that. So we took.
But PayPal has all the fees. How do they have these fees still?
Just charge a little bit more.
Charge a little extra.
Yeah, cover your costs.
So you are now an alcoholic in recovery, and you've been through the mill. Did you see any of that when you're getting close to the end of Syracuse? Because you graduated in 4 years. I graduated in 4 years too. My parents couldn't believe it, and I was wasted the whole time, but functional.
Yeah.
Like I think if I told myself back then what was going to happen, I'd say, I don't think so. But there were seeds. How about for you?
There was definitely seeds. If I'm being completely honest, I mentioned my grandfather earlier. I had men that I grew up around in my life that I admired, I looked up to. They were caretakers of me. They looked after me. They supported me. My grandfather, who, like I said, was a Marine, scary, tough, strong, great family man. He, in my personal opinion, struggled with alcohol. The behavior as a result of a couple martinis was alarming. It was scary. It was hard to be around that. And anybody knew growing up, when he had a couple, stand away. My father always had a healthier relationship with alcohol, but he drank a lot, and he was able to control himself and never was like a dick. He was just having a good time, but he definitely had alcohol in the house. And then my uncle, my mom's brother, was an alcoholic. And full on. And I met many memories of Christmases and visits when he came into town. He would drink a ton of wine, have outbursts with my father. He was also a military veteran, and I have a lot of grace for what he went through because he was in Vietnam. He came home
traumatized,
getting spit on by people here in the U.S., being told that he was a horrible person, and all the trauma he had, what he witnessed, he brought a lot of that home, and he really struggled, and I can understand. But I watched him many times as an alcoholic, just behaviorally drinking and the ups and downs of that. And then my brother. So I had three men. And
your uncle was your dad's brother?
Uncle was my mom's brother.
Okay, I was going to say.
He was my godfather, though. So my grandfather, Carl, my dad's father.
Your namesake.
And I'm named after him. Then my mom's brother, Peter. And then my brother. All of those men. Alcohol was a big part of their life, and I think also if you look at mental health as well, I love all these men, but they've been through some shit. And I think whether it's war or military stuff, addiction, anxiety, depression, it all spanned those men as well too. And I also have anxiety and depression. I live with anxiety and depression. I don't suffer from anxiety and depression.
You figured out ways to deal with it.
To work with it. And I think as I unpacked more about my family and the men I was surrounded by, it allowed me to have a lot more respect and grace for them versus the anger and resentment that I had for them. Well,
you come out of college a success, but
somewhat.
Basically.
Yeah, I graduated in 4 years, had good GPA.
Your brother is stealing fucking Elf at Christmas time, and you're graduating with a good GPA.
Well, I'll never forget that. My brother told this story. Because I graduated from Syracuse in May of 2007. I went back to Pittsburgh and I went out with some friends of mine to a nightclub. And my brother heard about this from someone else who was at the club that knew my brother. And basically the story was, I saw Carl at the nightclub. He was buying bottles of vodka at a table, spending money, popping champagne. Where the fuck is he getting this money from? So the next day, I had an $800 credit card bill with a $1,000 limit on it.
Right.
And I was about to move to LA to start my
Acting career?
Post-college career. And my brother was like furious with me. Why the fuck are you spending $800 at a nightclub on alcohol? He was really upset.
What was he upset about, though?
Because I don't have $800.
Because you were being irresponsible, and he was trying to big brother you.
Yes, and he also knew I don't have $800. Why am I spending on an alcohol? So he was privy and picked up on stuff early on.
But you were like, dude, you're all strung out
That's
on
why
everything.
I was like, fuck you.
Right.
You stole my bike.
Is that what you said? Is that your response?
I probably.
And what did he say to that?
He was like,
You got me there. You got me there,
multiple,
Carl. Right.
Bikes.
My skis are in the fucking pawn shop right now.
Baseball bats.
Right.
DVDs, all sorts of shit. My mom's jewelry at one point, which is really
So,
sad.
but this is, so you're, it's like your alcoholism, I think, was rooted in this party, because it's like, it extends to this summer house experience, like these lavish kind of experiences where everybody's like living it up and enjoying it, and you get the depressant of the alcohol with the exuberance of the status, togetherness, women, clothes, prestige, right?
Yes. I always wanted to fit in and feel accepted. And it's funny, like we weren't rich kids growing up, but I grew up in a part of Pittsburgh that is a little more upper middle class. People had nicer houses and nicer cars. We weren't always to that level.
Right.
I joked, like, the car I drove in high school had a missing window, and like one of the doors didn't even open because it was in the back, like couldn't open. I had missing hubcaps, and like it just was what it was.
When do you think you felt drawn to that lifestyle?
Well, I had friends around me that had nicer vehicles, and even some family like my dad had brothers, and I have cousins who had nicer stuff than us. So I always maybe looked at, like, I built a little resentment around for what I had, because I was like, I want something else. I want what they have. I want a little nicer house. I wish we had a nicer car. I wish I could go to the nice vacation or go to the cool party. I always wanted what someone else had versus loving what I had right in front of me. Even though I did love it, it didn't fulfill me for some reason. I always wanted to feel like I was accepted by more status, more elite people that seemed on paper to have it all figured out with the clothes, the cars, the houses, the fashion. But as I uncovered in every world, I mean, there's always stuff behind the closed doors.
Right. You can't, it's like
but fitting in that environment was paramount to me, especially at Syracuse with, the New York kids, the Jersey kids, the Long Island kids, the Boston kids. I was kind of a fish out of water from Pittsburgh. I mean, there was one other girl from my high school that went to Syracuse, but she was younger than me. And then maybe another 2 or 3 people from Pittsburgh all around. I mean, there was probably 30 kids from Pittsburgh at the Syracuse University. And I didn't know them. And otherwise, I'm kind of like this random kid. So to fit in, drinking, coke use, even post-college, that's like what you did. I was in LA after college. You're in LA. What do? You're on movie sets. You're going down Hollywood Boulevard. You're on the Sunset Strip. I almost believed, I think, what I watched on TV too much. I love music videos. I love rock and roll and rap. And maybe the glorification of some of those.
And that was the popping bottle thing.
Yeah, going out to a club, partying late night, spending money
after hours, buying
getting a hotel room and trashing it.
Right, sure.
This rock starry, crazy
vision, which you actually got to basically fulfill.
Oh, I fulfilled it, and I have nothing to show for it.
That's not true.
Not true.
So what was your plan going to California in the first place?
So I wanted to work in production. My dream was to be a producer and like a screenwriter and potentially act a little bit. I always wanted to be like
in entertainment.
Like I want to be like not Tarantino, but like in this world where, people have really big ideas. Maybe it's a script or a documentary. And I'm like, I love that idea. Come meet this guy and like put it together.
Producerial dreams.
But then if it was a film that I helped produce, maybe there's like Joe Schmo, owner of the restaurant for this scene. I'd love to do that because I think I could deliver there. Quentin Tarantino appears in a lot of his films. There's plenty of other directors who at times you see them in their own work.
Sure.
I never viewed myself as like this full blown, like I'm going to be an actor, but I love being on camera. I loved performing. I wasn't great, but I did get a rush and an energy out of that environment.
Well, obviously you had a great ability, or that we wouldn't be here right now on our incredibly fancy setup.
Yes.
You know,
I love good conversation. I love like speaking and connecting and banter and witty conversation. But sometimes, as it relates to like acting, I maybe am not as skilled at that. So, early on in LA, like I was very disillusioned by it. Like I flew out on a one-way flight with a guitar.
Can you play?
I mean, Wonderwall.
Nice.
5 lines.
Are you excited for Oasis?
Maybe.
Are you excited for the return of Oasis?
I am.
I'm so excited.
Fucking badass. I love Oasis.
I'm so excited.
Big fan of Oasis, but I could play Wonderwall on acoustic.
I have a guitar. Maybe at the end we'll have you do a little number.
It's like 3 chords, and it's embarrassing.
Listen, we have to do it.
Today is gonna be. Yeah, I already embarrassed myself.
What happened in California?
I slept on a friend's couch for the first couple weeks because I spent $800 at a nightclub in Pittsburgh 3 weeks prior and had like no money. So I moved to LA with like basically broke, like an idiot. But I just was so determined to work in Hollywood and work in the TV world. So due to the Syracuse alumni network from Newhouse, there was a big contingent of people in LA. So they had a networking event right when I got out there. And I went to this country club in Beverly Hills, it was. And I met a bunch of like alumni, kids that had graduated before and even current, just fresh in LA. And I just grinded. I was a runner at a production company. They're famous for the film Party Monster, which is about the club kids.
Yeah. Michael Alig. Yeah.
Limelight and all those crazy.
Macaulay Culkin's in that movie.
Correct. So the production company that did that film, I was a runner. So I had a car and I drove scripts around. But I really learned a lot just walking indoors. I would do auditions in between making runs. I started acting in a small sketch comedy show in North Hollywood. Thought I'd get spotted by a casting person or a scout.
Yeah.
But trust me, there's a lot of seedy weirdos. I mean, I had people pretending to be casting people. There's a situation that happened on Summer House that was brought to life, but it happened when I was in LA. I was taken advantage of in a situation and still.
What happened?
I mean, I've talked about it on the show. I mean, I had a scene partner, female. The director of the show was older than me significantly, like 15 years older than me, and was a gay man and seemed to have a liking to me. But we had a big party at the end of our kind of stage show run at the actual theater in the back of it. And me and my scene partner were like drinking and getting drunk and we had some chemistry and we were hooking up.
Right.
He jumped in.
Wow.
And I was out of my body enough to not realize what was really happening until kind of like, okay, I don't like this. And I left. And I never talked about it.
Did she stay with him?
I don't know.
Was he after you or was he after the whole thing?
It was me and her making out and he jumped in and started touching me and I was so drunk and fucked up. Unpacking it and healing from it after all these years. I mean, I didn't talk about it for 10 years. I didn't tell anyone, not one person, because I was so embarrassed and so mortified because I'm a straight man and I didn't like what happened. I felt taken advantage of, and
you were taken
very
advantage
weird.
of.
But the way
that's assault.
But the way I dealt with it 10 years after was coked up, drunk, with a gay friend of mine. I told the story. And the way I told the story was almost like, yeah, I liked it. It was great.
Right. Like people, the people pleaser and
people
you came
pleaser,
out.
100%. And then that story he shared later on. And it basically was unearthed in the public arena on the show.
He told the story as almost, he had this currency about you.
It created a divide with some of the friendships because basically he learned this information and then told a girl that I was hooking up with. And the girl then asked me what happened. I said, he's lying because I didn't have the balls to own it. Because it was my story to tell. So it created this huge controversy. Me and him are cool. We made amends.
How did you make peace with it with the scene on the show when it happened?
I went into a downward spiral. Completely could not believe that. I never knew in a million years, like I'm on this TV show, but this is something that happened 10 years ago and I'm not even in charge of telling it. Someone else is telling it for me.
So he tells the story, you're mortified, and you say he's lying.
This is off camera. I said he's lying, but then I'm then confronted by it on camera, and I said, yeah, it happened.
Who confronts you on camera?
He did, finally.
Was he a cast member or is he like periphery?
He was a cast member.
Right. And then you own it.
I owned it, but it created a huge divide, and I didn't handle it well then because I was very upset. I was hurt.
You were still using.
I was still using, still drinking a lot, and him and I, partied, together, and we were friends, and it created a huge divide. Which, like I said, we've later now. He made amends to me. I made amends back. I've seen him. We've been cool. I don't harbor any hate for it, but for me, I couldn't believe that something like this was going to be so public, and it really fucked me up because I'm a straight man. I felt taken advantage of, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So it wasn't fair for me to how I operated back then. I created even more problems around it by how I responded to it.
I would imagine that being on a reality show, that it's almost like being a kid with a gun. You don't know how to handle all this attention, and you weaponize shit that you don't mean to weaponize, and you don't know. Like now, fucking 8-9 years in, you understand exactly what's happening, especially sober.
Yeah.
It's like that's got to be a minefield all over the place. But I don't want to jump ahead. I want to get to where things really fall apart. So, and I also want to, I think it's important to know the construct of the story. So you were in California to do show business, but that doesn't work out.
No, I mean, I had some moderate success. I mean, I was working for a show called Criminal Minds. It's still on CBS.
What'd you do there?
I was a production assistant.
Nice.
And I worked for the unit production manager and the assistant production of the whole deal. So I got lunch, I got coffee.
You were working your way up.
I copied scripts. I did all sorts of shit. But I was really proud of it. It was really hard work. And I remember vividly seeing the executive producer of the show. He became a screenwriter in Hollywood in his late 30s. He was a Chicago police officer his entire 20s and early 30s, but had a dream of writing a script about a cop show. Got picked up. He later then developed it, and then his next show was Criminal Minds. So I started thinking to myself, here I'm working my ass off, making no money, driving a shitty car. I wasn't able to go out early years of LA because I didn't have any money. I used to buy enough lunches for the whole production, and I'd order an extra lunch that I could take. I'd hide it in my car, and I'd eat it for dinner that night because I didn't have any money.
It was very scrappy of you.
I was so scrappy and resourceful. And yeah, I just decided at one point, I'm like, I'm never going to survive in this. I'm just going to keep making 25 grand a year, driving a shitty car to hope to be a writer or screenwriter or producer someday. I don't even have the skill sets to audition. I can't even land a role. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm still young. And I had a friend at the time that worked in medical device sales, kind of like pharmaceutical sales. Like, there's a lot of money, entertaining clients, company car, playing golf, trips. I'm like, I want to do that. So I ended up interviewing, and I got a job in LA, or Orange County, technically, doing sales.
Was it like when you were in the showbiz world and you're not making any money, and you can't be using that much because you don't have any money? Like,
I wasn't using it really at all then because I was so broke.
And I'm sure you were like, wait a second, where's my $800 table service, bottle service, whatever?
Well, I didn't know how to meet people in LA without doing that.
Right.
Like I didn't know how to. I joined a basketball league with some guys at the production company, which I met some guys through that. But I struggled to kind of integrate socially because I worked a lot, and then, like I said, I made no money.
And you knew, I bet you something in the back of your head knew how much money you'd make at sales.
At the time, I actually wasn't confident fully, but what I did is I got hired as an inside sales person. So I sat at a desk with a bunch of other guys in like a call center, and you had to call like 100 people a day over the phone and sell. And after like 6, 7, 8, 9 months of that, you get really good at it. And I got a lot more confidence in picking up the phone. And prior to that, I'll be completely honest. There was a time I went to an audition. I didn't go inside. I drove all the way there, sat out in the parking lot, psyched myself out, drove away. But after going through sales and working in this kind of corporation and getting the skills and working at it, it gave me tools that I didn't have before.
And getting some success.
Yeah, just being confident, standing up in front of a person, presenting yourself and confidently speaking. I auditioned for Jason Alexander for Criminal Minds for an episode.
He directed it?
He directed an episode. He appeared in the episode and then he directed. And that's how that worked there.
He was dramatic in Criminal Minded?
He was.
Was he good?
He was a serial killer.
I could see that. That's
I
cool.
believe. Yeah, he was like a creepy guy.
Yeah.
And I auditioned for this role of like a spring breaker.
Not in real life. As in the show, he was a creepy guy.
Correct.
In real life, was he sweet?
He was really cool.
Okay.
Very kind.
Okay.
Very kind guy. Love Jason Alexander, Seinfeld.
He's not a creepy guy. We endorse Jason
The
Alexander.
role he played in
Yes.
that particular part of Criminal Minds was very creepy. And I think he would agree.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that
He
was
almost looked like Colonel Sanders. He had like this long gray hair with like a white facial hair. He didn't look like Jason Alexander.
Right.
So, but I auditioned for a role of like a spring breaker. But I remember vividly just shaking and sweating profusely. And
scared.
So scared.
Terrified.
So I just didn't have some of the skills to be like Carl, to be like confident, to be me.
It's all practice. It's just like that 9 months on the phone. You're like, I'm sure the first time you pick up the phone, it's scary as fuck.
I remember picking up one time, I got the hold of the other person, and I just like froze and just hung up.
Yeah, of course.
Didn't say anything.
I was a telemarketer in LA for like a week, but I was on heroin and I was supposed to sell tickets I was supposed to sell tickets, that Disney opera house they had just built. I was selling tickets to that. I don't even think it was a week. I think I lasted 2 days. I was like nodding out on the phone. I was like saying stupid shit it was horrible. It was fucking as bad as you could imagine. Did you see the HBO show, The Telemarketers?
I saw a piece of it, but I didn't dive fully in.
That was my version of the telemarketer.
Just
Totally.
getting super fucked up.
But the place was like a nice call center. I was just a
You
total.
were fucked up at the call center.
I was terrible. It was terrible. But I mean, that whole period was just awful. When you get into sales, is that when you're like, oh, I can drink like I want. I can be who I want to be.
That's when I actually, for the first time, drinking became, if you were a good drinker and a good socializer in sales, I felt like you were a better salesman.
Right.
To me, when I looked at some of the other successful sales guys, they were going out to dinner with their clients. They were playing golf with their clients. They were traveling with their clients. They were socializing, going out all the time and entertaining. And that was a big thing back then. You had a company credit card. And
I'm sure it still is right now.
there's been some laws that were put in place. One of them called the Sunshine Act, which if you took a medical doctor to a dinner on behalf of a company, you'd have to register it on like a database. So at the end of the year, you could like type in a doctor's name and see where.
Is that because of Purdue Pharma and OxyContin and all that
Some
stuff?
of that, yeah. I mean, you had pharmaceutical companies throwing massive amounts of monies at doctors to write scripts. Purdue being a great example.
You're very fortunate you got into the device side of things and not the fucking pharmaceuticals.
I always viewed pharmacy, and this is no shade at anybody who's ever sold pharma. To me, the pharma side of sales always felt greasy and used car like. Even though it maybe wasn't, that was just my perception of it. But the actual medical device where I was like in an OR.
What kind of devices are you selling?
So initially
this
it was
defibrillator will totally make your heart come back.
Dental medical devices. So I originally came to this company and we sold orthodontics.
Okay.
So braces, wires. We also sold like little mini screws that you could implant into your gums to help anchor orthodontic treatment. All sorts of ortho supplies. But as that evolved,
Any nitrous dispensing equipment?
surprisingly no.
Okay.
But yeah, like it was a crash course in like entertaining your doctors and getting drunk with them. I used to go out all the time with my clients because if you got drunk with them and had a good time,
They were buying
they
something.
were buying from you.
And you knew that.
Always. And there were doctors that weren't that way, but there was a handful, and a lot of these dentists and orthodontists were a lot of fun. They loved to be social too.
And I bet there's a world of alcoholics who were in sales that were getting high from the selling, from the money, and from the alcohol as an almost hybrid addiction.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, funny random story. I did very well with early years of the company, like very well. It was just making my quota. I was liked. People thought I was doing a good job. I was promoted to like a sales territory here in New York.
So you came back.
I came back to the East Coast. I was in Philadelphia briefly, but I was working the whole New Jersey market and New York City. So I'd get in my company car in the morning, drive up the turnpike, and see doctors and clients, but I'd party in the city and sometimes stay overnight here and then sometimes drive back. I drove back drunk many times, taking a client out in New York City, but then going back to my Philadelphia apartment. But it wasn't really, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I had many times at like a work company event where I was overboard, and one example was in Vegas. So I had a really good year of sales and I was voted rookie of the year.
Nice.
Or I was in the running for rookie of the year or 100% club or whatever it was. I was still in my room passed out from the night before.
You missed the award.
At 6 p.m. I had a crazy, crazy night. I did coke all night, passed out at like 8 a.m. I was supposed to be at these meetings early. I did get up, go to the meetings. I went back to my room before the dinner ceremony. I'm just going to lay down for 30 minutes. Passed out for 3 hours. I woke up to a security guard at the hotel coming into my room. And I ran downstairs and they had already announced my name.
And these are kind of like, these are the early consequences.
At that point, it was like, the anxiety when I realized I missed it. Like, what do I do? What do I say? Like, it's clearly because I was up all night doing coke and drinking. But I was like, I overslept. And honestly, it kind of smoothed over.
How so?
People kind of laughed at it at the time.
Well, right. It's not because until you're totally ruined, it is kind of funny.
It was kind of funny, but it was embarrassing beyond belief. But I say that because it wasn't until a few years later that same company did fire me.
When does coke start coming back into the picture?
LA, once I started getting some more money doing sales, that's when it would dip in a little bit.
Where would you get it in LA?
I had a contact through the TV show I worked on, and he was getting like large amounts of it. So we were able to get a better deal.
Would you buy huge bags of coke?
Like a big rock of it, yeah. And then break it down and like almost like chip away at it over time.
It would be like an 8-ball or something.
Bigger than that.
Like what would an ounce of coke? How much does an ounce of coke go for back then? I never bought an ounce of coke. I never bought an ounce of anything except weed.
I'm not sure.
And it's very rocky.
Like it came in a rock form almost, and it was like so crystally, and you'd like chip it at it, and like that's.
Did they have a story about where it came from or anything?
I was always prime and keen on like the highest quality, because plenty of times it's been past something and it just felt very gravelly and not great. But I started to find people where I could like the quality was a premium, so I was willing to go that route. But I had a friend who was also like that. He loved the premium stuff. So I would, if anything, he would buy it. I'd give him a little bit of money, but he wanted something to do it with.
Right. And so you get turned on to coke. Then you get turned on to status coke, the good coke. And you would get the good coke. Then you come back here and it's like.
Once I got back to New York City and took this new job and I actually moved to Soho. So I was in Philadelphia, did well enough that they were like, okay, you can move to New York City and cover the New York area. So I was doing this sales job. I had this Soho apartment on Thompson Street. Fucking loved this place. It was like the perfect place for me.
Right.
Studio apartment right on Spring and Thompson. Epicenter of cool in New York. Going out, bars, coffee shops, clubs. I want to say the first 2 days there had a dealer already lined up who would deliver in like a black looking Uber like car. And he'd be there in less than 30 minutes.
Good coke.
In the jar, really good.
Jarred coke.
The jar to me was an elevated.
Of course.
Not a little shitty bag or not a little whatever.
Is it a jar or a vial?
A vial, sorry.
The vialed coke could be seen as the crack, but you're getting the good shit. Jason Biggs came on the show and he would talk about getting his pink coke. Do you ever get the pink coke?
I got the pink stuff.
Here?
Yep.
The audience thinks the pink coke is not real.
No, there was some pink shit that floated around for sure. Now, whether it was dyed by the people or whether it was some sort of kind of...
Back in the day, it was the pharmaceutical coke was pink. It was Merck Coke was
Merck
pink
Coke.
Back in the day. I don't know if that's still the story. I know that when he was on, like we had we talked about it on the show, and he like he was sure it was the Merc Coke, but then the audience was unsure of it. Like, who was the guy, and how did you pedigree your Coke?
It was, I mean, you meet people through meeting people.
Yeah.
I would meet someone who had, if I saw someone, I'd look at whatever people's bags looked like or what their paraphernalia was. And certain people had higher quality paraphernalia.
So, like, what kind of paraphernalia?
I mean, they had like a Coke spoon. Or there was these little, like, they almost look like an inhaler, but it was like for your nose. And you could just do a quick bumper.
Like the bullet thing that you scoop it up
Correct.
with. Yeah.
So I'd see people like that and be like, okay, this guy's
a professional addict.
He knows what he's doing.
Yes.
So I'd ask him, like, where do you get your stuff? Or develop a relationship somehow. But I had a couple different people that I knew would take certain money. So like a guy would be cash only. I had a guy that would take PayPal and Cash App. Another guy that would take Venmo. So depending on where I was financially, I could always kind of game it.
Right.
And depending on the weekend or time of day, I knew there was a guy that was always 24/7. So when I played through and partied all night, I would buy Coke at 8 a.m. all the time.
And like, did you ever get broke in that period?
Absolutely. I remember, running myself into credit card debt. And I fortunately was always able to hustle a little bit to make some money, but I was late rent.
And you were drinking heavy?
I drank beyond because I was going into financial despair because of my partying, and I didn't know how to stop it. But the only way to feel better about going into despair was to keep drinking and get fucked up through it. So I remember vividly in the fall of 2019 when I was at my darkest and lowest I've been in ever, other than my rock bottom. I'll tell you a random story about what happened after this, but I would just go out without any money. I remember going out one night, I didn't have, I couldn't use my credit card and my bank account was negative, but I still went out and just figured it out.
How'd you figure it out?
Hey man, you mind picking up my drinks tonight? My credit card got stolen.
Who's the guy?
People I had friends that we'd party with.
There's a scene.
It was a scene. They were good people overall, but I was probably closer to them because of some of the drinking and partying.
Right. You knew they wanted to do right by you, and one day you would do right by them.
Correct.
And you made it.
Correct. But there was many times that, I just kept I'd have a situation, it'd be really bad. Another example in 2019, it was at the end of the summer. I flew to Las Vegas for a bachelor party. I went out the night before in New York. I didn't go to sleep. Came back, showered, shaved, packed, went to the airport, Newark, still fucked up, drunk and coked up. Get through security, go sit at a bar. I run into a friend of mine. She looks at me and she's like, oh. And she knew me really well, very well. And she was like, I'm leaving. I can't be near you right now. You're a disaster. Took a Xanax at the bar, had a couple Bud Lights, got on the flight, and that's all I remember. But what I remember waking up to is when we landed in Vegas, I was sitting in the stewardess's jump seat, which is reserved just for them, not passengers. But what I later learned, because a friend of mine knew someone who was also on the plane that I didn't know them. They knew who I was because I'm, on a TV show and all that stuff. But was later told that I was got into a verbal altercation with a woman sitting next to me about my Jack Daniels.
And they moved you to the jump seat.
They moved me to the jump seat to kind of separate the issue. And basically it got back out. Carl was wasted on a flight and got into an altercation with this other person. And I have a picture of it. I had 2 little airplane bottles of Jack, upside down in a little, those airplane sized glasses with Coke in it. And it was just 2 of them poured in. And that's the last picture from that airplane ride.
Now, it's when you're selling in New York, when does the phrase alcoholic pop up?
I would always hear it from other people.
What, Carl's a fucking alcoholic?
No.
You're an alcoholic.
Carl's a cokehead.
Right.
Carl's crazy. But I always had a penchant for getting back enough and kind of presenting.
So people were more concerned about your than your alcohol.
No, I think I presented it as my alcohol, even though it was most of the time or alcohol combined. I was really good at early on of hiding that. I would always just frame it. I was really drunk. I was always really drunk. I was really drunk.
But in your head, are you ever fuck, I might be a addict. I might be an alcoholic.
I mean, I always had I would have these stances on certain, and I say this honestly because I was notorious for the late night party. People would come back to my apartment, do blow lines, listen to music, watch music videos, drink, smoke cigarettes out the window, come up with crazy business ideas, say crazy shit, and then the sun comes up and everybody's like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. And I would keep going.
Right.
I just loved the after hours. I loved the late night, but I remember vividly people saying, if they made a comment like you're a addict, I'd be like, all the smart people do coke.
Right.
You know, the successful people can do it and turn it off.
There was an old.
I always had some fucking quip for it.
Well, there was an old public service announcement, which is it was like, the more money I make, the more coke I could do. The more money I make, the more I could do coke, and I can make more money, and then I could do more coke, or something like that.
Something like that.
But when do you fucking fall into Summer House?
So Summer House came about. I learned about this whole opportunity with Kyle, who was a friend of mine.
How did you know him?
I met him in the Hamptons the previous summer.
You're just hanging out.
Just hanging out. Like I said, I'd get a table at a nightclub, or I'd roll with a big group of friends. And Kyle was also there with Everett, who was on the first season. And I ran into them, and I had a 6-liter bottle of rosé, like
giant bottle,
taller than your neighbor that we just saw here.
Suzanne.
It's a very large bottle of alcohol, very large. And I bought it, and it was sitting at my table.
Were they on the show already?
This wasn't a show yet.
Okay.
I was just partying, and Kyle came up to me and was like, sick bottle, man.
Right.
And we exchanged some conversation, and I ran into him at the gym in New York City like a week later. And I was like, aren't you the guy that was partying at the
complimenting me on my wine bottle?
Now he's at the gym, like pumping iron. And I was this work hard, play hard guy. Like I always was like staying fit, working out, sweating out all the and booze, only to put it right back in. But yeah, Kyle and I met that summer before it was ever a show, and we developed a friendship that fall and that winter. But it wasn't until that spring I was actually in my dentist's office, my dentist who was a client and friend. I sold the dental stuff that I'd been doing, and he knew Kyle and Everett. And he asked, he had asked me, he's like, hey, did you hear about the show Kyle and Everett are going to be on? I'm like in the chair getting my teeth cleaned. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, they're going to be on some show. I'm like, interesting. So I pull out my phone, sitting in the chair, and I emailed them. Said, hey, boys, Lane told me about the show. What's going on in the Hamptons? ? And they wrote back, it's funny you ask about the Hamptons. We're looking for another guy.
Wow.
And I knew in the back of my head, Kyle and I were friendly, but we talked, and he had a very cool kind of thing that he was like talking through. He's like, yeah, like, we're already doing this anyway, man. Like, we're partying in the Hamptons in a house with friends. Now they're going to follow us with some cameras. We'll see what could happen.
And pay us.
It wasn't a lot, but Kyle's stance and mine, I agreed. This is a platform. It's an opportunity to maybe promote our own personal story or our own business or brand.
We're doing it anyway. That's what you do in your life.
Yeah.
No matter what. And if you're a young person in the Hamptons, meeting people, networking, you are your own platform. And you have social media, you have your own platform.
Yeah.
Even without Summer House. So it's
True.
like,
But I think at that time in my life, I'd been at that sales job doing dental sales for 6-7 years at that point. I was kind of at a standstill, maybe professionally, of where I thought I was going, and the show seemed like an opportunity I couldn't turn down. I also something about Kyle and I's friendship, I was drawn to that.
he seems like he really loves, you guys love each other.
Oh, we love each other.
Very
beautiful.
beautiful.
He's one of my best friends. Kyle he's a lot of fun. I always admired Kyle's partying skills, because guess what? Kyle didn't do Kyle just drank. It never does. Like, it's not his thing. It never has been. And he had an amazing motor and ability to have a good time.
He's probably not an alcoholic is what it is.
No, he can turn it off, and
right.
He can, it has not controlled his life. It has not, become a major issue for him. I mean, we all have our moments at times, but it was just like a cool opportunity that it's felt like something we could do to have a good time and see what happens with it.
So you add Summer House to your budding addiction and alcoholism, and like, how do they go together? Is it symbiotic? Do you manage it at first?
I mean, manage it at first. I mean, even the first couple of weekends, I think I was just drinking and doing that, but then Adderall
came back.
Yeah, let's say we had full-time jobs. You'd work a full or half day Friday, and then you'd have to go out to the Hamptons and
stay up all night.
Stay up and film and be on. So, Adderall at times.
Did you get the script for the Adderall, or were just getting it?
People had some, and I didn't have a script at that point. I was just getting it from other friends.
What about benzos?
Sometimes Xanax just to come down from all the nonsense. Those were harder to find, but I did at one point I have a picture of it on my phone. I bought like 2,000 bars, Xanny bars. So I was selling a little bit of those and then, keeping the ones for myself.
And you're still doing the dental sales in the beginning.
Yep.
And what was the experience of being on a reality show? How old were you when it started?
I was 29 when I agreed.
So everyone wants to know, what's that like?
Being on a reality show?
Being 29 in the Hamptons, drinking Adderall, Coke.
I mean, it felt like
Xanax.
I was like living the high life.
That was the rock star shit.
I felt like I was doing something really cool and exclusive and unique. And it's kind of why you like dream of working hard and coming to a really big city like New York, is to go to these lavish, exclusive places like the Hamptons. I'd always dreamt. My memory of the Hamptons was Don't Tell or Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah.
Which actually wasn't even filmed in the Hamptons apparently, but it looks like it is. I just thought that was the Hamptons, like this yuppie rich lifestyle, the drinking, the Coke. It seemed glamorous and cool.
Well, it is glamorous, and it is, and it's intense, and you're at the center of it because there's cameras following you around. How different is partying in the Hamptons without cameras versus with them?
I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit more liberal off camera.
Right.
I was, when we were filming, I would try to keep some level of
decorum.
I mean, certainly alcohol was always a big player, but I wasn't like, at the dinner table doing filming. Like that wasn't ever a thing, but
that'd be a much different show.
We went out at night, and if I was at a club, there were no cameras rolling and someone had some Coke, I'd do a couple bumps and then go back to the house.
And then how useful were the substances when you have this pressure of being on camera?
I mean, alcohol being my favorite for camera. Alcohol was always the best for filming early on. I drank a little bit in the car ride on the way out. Maybe have one in the parking lot before I walked into the house. Just gave me this confidence. Always gave me a confidence, and I always a joke with my friends, like I was the man after 2 whiskeys and 1 bump.
Right.
Like funny, smart, witty, just good, really dialed in, and no. Maybe a little bit I was, but
it's the I have arrived thing.
Yeah, I thought I was the fucking that's what was my thing.
And we are until we're not. I mean, I had when I was a kid, I got to be on a TV show, and I found that I just did for it. And maybe for a day, I was the man. And very quickly, I declined, and I did not manage it. But I knew what it was to have anxiety and to have neuroses and to take something to deal with being on camera, to deal with talking to people, to deal with being this person.
Yeah.
But I was certainly not in a social situation, and I was not on Bravo. You know what I mean? So when you have this pressure and you are the man for a second, when does oh fuck, I wish I hadn't done that start showing itself?
I mean, I think when the show started airing and I was watching it back.
Were you watching it back from the second it started?
Yeah, we had a premiere party for the first season.
Where was that?
At a bar here in New York.
Uh-huh.
And the whole cast invited their friends, and it was at that point it wasn't a thing. No one really knew about Summer House. We were this new random show. But we threw a big party that night and drank and partied watching ourselves back. And over the course of that season, watching myself back was holy fuck, almost in shock of what I was putting on display, and also going, wow, am I really that much of a douchebag? Am I really that much of a dick?
Was it ever, am I really that much of an alcoholic? When do those thoughts start coming in? And how did you get fired from the dental sales company?
The morning after the show premiered.
No way.
So I filmed all that summer. Then we had a couple months break, and then January of 2017, so 2017 came around, and the show season 1 of Summer House premiered. The next morning, my boss called me and said, I'm at the Hilton Garden Inn in Tribeca. Bring your cell phone and your laptop. Today's your last day.
Why?
I mean, I drove the company car over the weekend to the Hamptons at times. I was down in my quota. And if I'm being completely candid, it was because of my alcoholism.
Why though? How was it the alcohol? Wouldn't he think that
over the course of 7 years, my manager gave me, I think, a lot of opportunities and grace. Remember, I told you I showed up late to receiving an award.
Yeah.
That wasn't the first time something like that happened.
But you'd think being a sales guy on a show like Summer House would be a huge asset for them.
You might think, but I was such a liability, and it's not cheap to have a sales rep in a market like New York.
Right.
And if they're not producing and making their quota,
It's like it doesn't work.
that's a very easy conversation. They were, I actually understood, and I told him right when he said that, I actually was like, I'm not coming. I'll FedEx it back to you. Thanks. Just hung up the phone, and I've never talked to him again.
Were you thinking like, it's okay, I have this show, I'm this guy?
I was almost ready to get fired, but I was in shock of how it went down. But I, at that point, thought, oh shit, I've got to figure something else out now. Because the show wasn't anything big yet. Like, it was just another little part of our life. And I still had to have a full-time job, and so did a lot of the other original cast members. Like, we had to work because this wasn't a full thing. So I had to go figure my shit out. But guess what? That day I got fired, I went right to Spring Lounge. Spring Lounge opens early for anybody who watches and knows New York City. I mean, it's one of the bars that's open at like 8:30 in the morning. You want to see a real slice of life at a bar
On Spring Street.
on Spring Street in Soho.
That's where I had a guy, an old man I used to do with every day. Like, we'd meet up and we'd wander around to cop, and I called him the professor. And when I couldn't find him, his old lady wife would be like, he's at Spring Lounge, and I'd have to go there. And I was this kid and get him off the stool so we can go cop. So I know that spot's crazy in the morning.
It's crazy in the morning. You got guys reading the New York Times with a Pabst Blue Ribbon.
That's an old New York spot.
It's one of the oldest bars in the city.
Yeah,
And it was close to where I lived. So I got some beers, marched down to Spring Lounge, did coke, got fucked up, buried it all. Oh, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. I'm going to be, I got this TV show thing. I'll be able to make some more money. I did find another kind of part-time sales thing with another startup.
Right.
Which didn't work out because of my alcoholism and my, use, not showing up. I was notorious for like finding an excuse to cancel the meeting. I'd come up with all sorts of stuff.
We all do that. Any classics?
I mean, flat tire. I did get into a car accident one time, but I used that at a time that I didn't get in a car accident.
Right. You want to hear my worst one? It's really horrible. I worked at Petland Discounts on 23rd
So
Street.
your dog died?
No, I said this is how crazy I am. I had friends that wanted just to ride around and smoke weed with me, and I really wanted to do it. And one of them was this gay rapper guy, and the other one was a friend from high school. And I told them that my gay brother was dying of AIDS in the hospital. This is what I told my boss at Petland Discounts. My gay brother was dying of AIDS in the hospital, and he was on the outs with my parents because they didn't accept his gay lifestyle, and I was the only one that he would talk to. So I could get a day off from Petland Discounts. That's how mental I am. But anyway, so your Summer House is growing, and sales is happening, and like alcoholism is probably accelerating.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
You're not impressed with my Petland Discount story.
No, I think that's
Horrible.
fucked up.
It's horrible.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's
So
horrible.
I
It's
appreciate
horrible.
you being honest about
Yes,
it.
it's horrible.
I mean, we all have done terrible, horrible things, but I guess
Yes.
you just got to keep trying to, not. I mean, obviously, I think joking about it in a way is like how you heal from it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty bad, and trust me, I've said crazy shit too. So
I don't know why I would have come up with such a dumb lie. All I have to say is I'm sick.
you're sick.
Oh,
That's a great way to frame it.
I know.
Sickness makes you do crazy things.
Well, no, I mean, all I had to say to the Petland Discounts people was I'm sick.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have
Well,
to
you are sick. That's why you said that.
100%. So speaking of which, you're on this show, you're losing jobs, but your kind of personal stock is rising. How's your family responding?
I mean, it built some resentment with my family because my brother was still actively using and struggling, but here I am now on this TV show. And from what it looked like on the outside, I was getting praise or celebrated, But I knew my brother knew that I was drinking and doing a lot of
How do you know he knew?
because he knew.
Because he could see it, like when you're out at night or
I
whatever.
think he could pick up on.
He knew you, and he knew
related.
what Coke was like.
Exactly. And then I did talk about his addictions on the show. So to round it out, what you were just mentioning about, making up a story or coming up, I just leaned in on the truth, but it wasn't the right place. It didn't come from a place of love and support and grace and like care. It came from like, I'm making an excuse and I need a reason why I'm doing stupid shit.
Well,
So
it's
I basically was just like, the reason I drank last night and got so fucked up is because my parents are getting divorced and my brother's a heroin addict.
So you kind of did what the gay guy did to you with them, because you don't know how to weaponize, you don't know what to say, and how to manipulate, right? It's like this huge opportunity to manipulate, and that's what we all do.
Yep.
And here you are, and you knew that story would get you some grace.
In the time when I said it, I felt like it was needed to be said because I was angry at my brother. I didn't understand his addictions fully then, but I spoke out of turn, and it really it was bad because my brother was actually so proud to tune into that episode that day.
Wow.
And he tunes in, and it's me basically making fun of his addiction. And yeah, it created a huge rift between me and him.
What did he say?
He went to Facebook at the time and posted a collage of pictures with him and his children. And he was married at that time. And, hey, Bravo TV, like, is this what a fucking that? Like,
right.
Really angry and upset.
Right.
And to be completely honest, when you see what he posted, you can sense that there's a lot of pain and a lot going on inside. I still feel really bad about it because it created a huge rift between me and my brother.
Did you ever talk to him about it?
No.
Oh my God.
Not officially. And, the craziest part about that is this happened. And then a couple of weeks later, my grandfather, Carl, passed away. So the guy I mentioned at the beginning of this, who's my kind of other hero, and I looked up to him, he finally passed away. And he was kind of the patriarch of the family. And, my brother and I had to carry his casket out at the funeral. And that was the first time I'd seen my brother since that commentary on television. And I just told him I loved him. And we kind of put everything aside at that funeral.
And he accepted that.
I think he was not in the right frame of mind. I was asked to give a eulogy. He was asked to give a eulogy. I was prepared. He was writing his notes 2 seconds before going up there. He was nervous. I think he was under the influence of something.
Yeah.
He was also struggling with the loss of my grandfather. And it was a lot, but I apologize. I tried to kind of clear the air in that moment, and then left that funeral, and we never really talked for a bit. And then the next time I got a chance to talk to him was in 2020. I had gotten sober and hit my rock bottom. I got sober. I started doing meetings. I got a sponsor. I did 90 and 90. I was working the steps.
We definitely have to go back to the rock bottom, but I want to hear what you're going to say.
And I was on this kind of spiritual awakening journey. I'm feeling good about where I'm going. And my mom presented me with an idea in June of 2020 that I can maybe meet up with Curtis and her, because he was going to be available to come visit. And I, at that time, just told myself I'm not ready yet. I'd still this feeling about him. I loved him, but I was angry and I was sad. And so I declined. And then it wasn't until a couple of weeks later, my mom got remarried. And there was a kind of a debate about how many people could come to the wedding at that time. Because of COVID, you couldn't have more than 20 people in a place in some states and cities. So there was a big debate about my brother attending the wedding. And he ultimately didn't attend the wedding.
Your mom's wedding.
Correct. And he was upset. He was angry. But what he had hoped for when my mom got remarried was that he could take over the house that I grew up in. And my mom told him prior to the wedding, I don't think you're ready yet. She thinks that kind of maybe caused some spiral. But my mom got married. And then a week later, my mom calls me. It was on August 11th. It was around 7 a.m. I was in the house filming Summer House. I'd been there for a couple weeks, and my mom called me. I was awake a little bit already, and I saw the phone light up on my nightstand, and it said my mom's name, and I don't know what went over me, but I knew it was my brother, because anybody who's had a loved one or someone in their life that has struggled, you always, at a certain point after all these crazy ups and downs, in the back of your mind, just someday I might get that call.
And you had the sense that it was him.
100%. So I picked up the phone, and my mom, as soon as the first word out of her mouth, I knew. And I broke down, and I screamed and I cried. I screamed and cried so loud that the girls below me, a full floor below me, could hear me on the phone. And then I ran upstairs and I found Kyle, who was awake, about to do a workout. And I just looked at him and I just told him, my brother passed away. And, he gave me a big hug, and it was an emotional moment, but having Kyle, give me a big hug and support me there was huge. And then I ran back downstairs and was trying to make sense of everything. And I called one of my producers, who to this day has been such a great support, because she also had a sibling who struggled, and she related to me beyond. And she drove immediately over to the house, because our production team doesn't always stay at the house.
Right.
So she came over in the morning and cried and hugged on the front porch for an hour. And then as time evolved, people got awake and started coming out and trying to be there to support me. But I basically learned about my brother, passing away, and while filming this show, and I couldn't hide from it. It was all there.
Could you leave? Like, did you leave? What'd you do?
I did. I stayed another day or two, and then I was able to leave. But it was COVID, so there was all these restrictions, and things were a little sketchy. Plus, we were filming a TV show, and
And you were sober at that point, though.
Actually, I was moderating.
So you weren't sober yet.
I did not raise my hand yet and say, I just would saying, I taking a break from drinking. I'm just going to drink Loverboy, or I'll just drink this. But that day he passed, I actually didn't get drunk that night. I got drunk the next day, but I used that as a license to go get fucked up. I mean, I remember at the funeral, there's a bar next to the funeral home in Pittsburgh where his services were, and we had a couple services throughout the day, and in between this, the breaks, I would go to the bar next door and crush a couple pints of beer.
See, I would imagine being on the show in general would feel like you're on acid, because you're surrounded by cameras and everything you say, is going to get used in some way or another. And I would imagine getting sober on camera is incredibly bizarre, but grieving on camera must have been the hardest thing in the world. Or was the grief so crazy that you forget the cameras?
No, the grief was really hard, because it was just so surreal having my brother's gone, and it's a horrible tragedy for my family, and I'm dealing with my own internal shit. But it was this massive slap in the face, wake up call. How the fuck are you alive?
Well, that's a good question.
I had done countless weird things, picking up a bag off the ground at a club and doing it, snorting stuff, drinking stuff, not sleeping, risky. And it like a wave just took over my life, losing my brother, and then going, well, fuck, I don't deserve this shit. I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. But at the same time, I was being praised in the media and through social media about how I was handling
the death.
Because also at the same time, I was simultaneously raising money for a rehab center in his honor. And I leaned in on that, but I still was drinking and using behind the scenes.
When you're drinking and using, because you weren't a heroin addict, you weren't an opiate addict, you weren't strung out in that way.
No, I never liked that stuff. It's funny. I'm lucky. I tried one time in college, a random thing, and it made me so sick. I'm never again.
But were you did you see, when do you start seeing that you're not that different than your brother?
Right then.
Right
there.
Right.
I was we're brothers.
See, isn't it crazy how it takes that level of loss to see I'm partying, I'm doing coke, but wait a second, I'm an alcoholic and he's gone. It's oh my God, that is very, very sad and hard to hear.
Yeah, it was. I don't even know how to make sense of it all still. I mean, the only thing I can think of is, my brother it happened the way it happened for a reason. I'm in this position because I was on a national platform, and I really believe my brother is helping people.
He is.
Through me, and he's also helping me. And it's been hard as it is to reconcile that piece that he's protecting me and looking out for me, and I view him as my higher power in my program. It's just been like, I'd take him back in a heartbeat for any of that shit, you know?
That's exactly what I always say about.
That's what makes it so fucking weird and so hard, is because like I have a superhero power and I have this shield and this badass like grit inside of me because of all the things I've been through and the things I've learned as a result of his being gone and taking ownership of my own shit and taking better care of myself. It's like, fuck, yeah, that's great, right? Like I have this resolve and this strength and this like kind of fight within me, but I don't need that. I want him back, you know, like, and that's what's so hard sometimes to reconcile. And I try to remind myself that, you know, if I can help one person or my brother can help one person, then that's just why it happened that way.
Right.
And to lean in on it and try to make the most of it.
It happened that way it's like, I'm not one of the people who say everything happens for a reason, but I say everything happens is the reason. Like it's happened and that's where we are. And this is where reality is. That was very rough to be honest. I mean, like, as I can feel the whole thing. Where does your bottom come from in there? Like what happens to you? Like, and because you described.
Yeah. So part of what really triggered and set the bottom was like, okay, like my brother's gone. I'm being praised and celebrated. I mean, there's an article that I found even from The Sun, which is like a tabloid in the UK. And it was like a picture where I looked healthy and I had been sober in that picture, but I was moderating at that point. And it was like Carl Radke's praised by the fans for how he's dealing with the loss of his brother. And that article just made me like want to jump off a fucking bridge. I'm like, I'm getting praised.
This is the imposter syndrome.
Imposter. Here I am drinking alone, doing cocaine alone. And then it started to spiral because I realized all of this is going to air on TV. So I filmed it. I lost my brother. We buried him or said goodbye to him. Had all the stuff. And then real life set in again. And I moved out of my Soho apartment into another apartment, thinking getting a change of scenery would be good.
In the Gramercy?
Gramercy. I told myself I'll never do coke in this new apartment.
First night.
Second night.
Right.
It's just classic. But living in that new apartment from basically end of November until my rock bottom day was just a constant. I'd order, there was a wine shop down the street. I would just have delivery of High Noon. I'd drink Loverboy. I'd drink red wine. Do coke by myself all the time. Call people, say crazy shit. And
jarred coke?
The jarred stuff. What I thought was the best, but I started just getting in my own head about how this is going to air. How am I going to deal with this when this is publicly on display next year? And I didn't know how to deal with it because I knew I needed to get sober, but I didn't know how. And over that period of time, I had people in my life that had reached out to me, and I got sat down by some people and said, you need to go to rehab. I got told by a friend of mine they would never speak to me again if I didn't get help. I had some other people say they're so concerned about me that they really think I need to take a look at it. So I had a few people in my life that really were like caring and supportive, and to a degree that was what I needed. And I'll never forget one conversation I had was with someone I've worked with on the TV show, and she's looked out for me. She's been a mother figure to me, and they sat me down at one point and told me, you need to like really look at this. And I still at that point wasn't comfortable talking about the cocaine part of my story. It was just the booze that I was like, that was easy. That's not
because they could see it. It was on the show.
But anybody who really knew me knew that when I was drinking, that the was involved.
And you knew how much money you were spending, and you knew how much you were doing.
I was in despair. I was broke from all the partying.
How much coke were you like? Would that?
And I'll just finish this because when this woman sat me down and told me I needed to like really take it seriously. I was like, yeah, it's my alcohol. Like she looks at me in the way, I'll never forget it, but she like just pierced right through my soul. And she's like, it's not just the alcohol, is it, Carl? And I was like,
dope.
Just like,
right. The camera pulls back.
Destroyed. And
right.
They know. They actually know. And that really was like okay, if that's out there, I've got to get this right. I've got to do something about this. But it didn't happen overnight. It really didn't. It took me those really ugly, dark, alone, calling friends. But luckily, I had some people from my past that reached out. One of which said, "Are you going to AA?" And I said, "No." He said, "You need AA." And that was in probably shortly after January of 2021 that I got a sponsor and got on the phone with him every night, read the 12 steps, worked the steps, attended 90 meetings in 90 days, fell to my knees, wrote down a list of shit and people and all the nonsense.
Yeah.
And really worked through it.
How does it work with the show? Because the show is wall to wall debauchery, and you walk in, I'm sober. Like, how do you function in it?
Well, I had practice season 1 of Summer House, which I didn't realize was going to set the tone for me. But I got sick back in the first summer of filming. I was partying so hard I would get strep throat.
Right.
My immune system was fucked. So I was at a wedding, and I went to the ER the morning of the wedding, and I was a groomsman in the wedding because I couldn't swallow or breathe because my throat was so fucked from all the drinking and coke use. I got back from the wedding, and I got antibiotics to help with the strep throat. So that next weekend, I was in the house filming, but on antibiotics, and I couldn't drink. And I basically said outwardly that weekend, "Guys, I'm on antibiotics. I can't drink." And it's funny because it was like the name of the episode is Sober Carl Is Not Fun.
Wow.
I believe, or that's like what's talked about in the episode.
Yeah.
But I remember in that moment, like I hated everybody because they were annoying, they were drunk, they were acting crazy. And I was like, and it's funny looking back on my behavior because I was kind of like frustrated by everybody and their behavior all weekend because of how drunk they were.
So when you get sober and it's like, it's not just antibiotics, it's like a new way of life, and you're on this house where drinking is the way of life. How do you deal with it? Because they're not drunk all day, I imagine.
No, not all day. And I was one that probably hit it the hardest. So it was probably a breath of fresh air in a way. It was like the mood was a little lighter because it wasn't, I'd show up notoriously on a Friday, like wasted from the night before.
But how
like,
would
I would bring all this negative energy, intense alcoholic energy. And
Yeah.
now it was like, oh, well, he's like, we want him around because like me not drinking is why I'm in the house now. Like that's what allows me to be there. If I drank, I wouldn't be there.
You wouldn't have made it.
I wouldn't make it.
No, I can
I
see
wouldn't
that.
have been. I would not be there. So it gives me this new opportunity. And I have great friendships in the house. And I think everybody knew at that point, after like raising my hand, like this guy's for real. Like he's serious about this and let's support him. So yes, it was hard, but that first summer wasn't hard. I wasn't reaching for the drink. It was dealing with everybody else around me and like watching them have fun or go through it and me being like, but also I was very judgmental.
Of course, because drunk people are so annoying when you're first
summer
sober.
of everybody, I'm like, it's because you're drunk.
Right.
You're crying because you're drunk. Like it was all that.
Right.
I learned a lot through my recovery in the last couple of years about the judgment and the.
But how did you even just navigate going out? And I'm not even saying like the temptation, yes, but just the annoyance, just the late night without Coke. Like how do you navigate partying with partying people?
I mean, it was hard.
It's the job, right?
Part of it was the job. I also took pride in knowing that people are going to watch this and hopefully see me in these environments and maybe get a little bit of confidence that they can do it too. It was crazy to me to think that a guy could be in a house and not survive because he doesn't drink. Like,
That's great.
I was like, that's nuts to me. Like, how can that not be the case? There's a way people can do this. But what I had to do was every day before filming, in the morning, meditate, work out, sometimes do a meeting virtually, get my mind right. That's how I got through it. If I didn't start with a good program in the morning,
You're fucked.
I was fucked.
It's brilliant though, because was someone in your ear saying this is an opportunity for people to see, like that you don't need to drink to have a good time with young people in this situation, or were you just like, I can do this, this is my duty kind of thing?
I mean,
Was Joe Schrank saying, Carl, this is the time?
No.
Celebrity alcohol whisperer, Joe Schrank?
I didn't know him at that moment.
Okay.
I was still working with my other sponsor, but Sorry, what was your question?
I don't know. No, where does that motivation come from to be able to?
Because I was so dark and down and beaten that I felt like everybody hated me. I felt like I was the black sheep, and I was like, I remembered being when I just like as I started doing more work on the resentments and the steps and stuff. I remembered as a kid how I was. And my mom and dad reminded me of this. I was social. I talked to everybody. I was the most confident kid at the playground. I'd walk up to people and poke them and go, "Can I get $1?" That's me. And I realized that I can be me, but I don't need alcohol to be me, and that's okay. And I started to find this balance of like, okay, like I'm a little quieter at the party, but that's okay.
Right.
Oh wait, I'm not like chasing around all these girls at the party, but that's okay.
Right.
And I got more repetitions and I got more practice. And it's every time I practiced a little bit socially, you build a little bit of a confidence level to deal with it better. So like, got my soda water, got a Red Bull. Maybe I was only at the bar for an hour that first time, and then I left early. But like, you get some practice and you get some kind of esteem. And guess what? Every time I went out, I was reminded every single time by every single person who's drinking of why I don't drink. So being social and being out is exactly what keeps me sober.
Right.
If I sit at home in a four walls without talking to anybody, that's where I want to get fucked up now.
Right.
But when I'm out socializing, I love being this way.
No, I think
I feel better this way.
I love that. I also love that you could tap into who you actually were.
And this is me now. For the first time ever, people are actually getting to meet Carl. And it took some time to get there. But like how we've been talking, even in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, I finally feel like myself. This is me. I'm goofy. I'm a little awkward. I can be a little zany sometimes. My emotions are what give me my power. And I used to not be able to handle that. I used to suppress them.
Right.
Drink to feel them.
Now
they come and they go and they're loud and they're all the things. But that's when I know I'm alive.
No, I can definitely relate to all of it. I would be remiss to not ask how this incredibly dramatic and ultimately sad, but ultimately happy end of the engagement with Lindsay. Like, how did you survive that with how difficult was that for your recovery? Because if anyone who doesn't watch Summer House, Carl was engaged to a woman named Lindsay, and basically the romance happened on the show and it ended on the show. And the engagement ended on the show. Are you okay?
Yeah.
How did you navigate it? How triggering was that? I know, like, that's when we met and you were not in the greatest space.
I mean, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. My brother being top of the list, but, going through a breakup suck no matter what. And being in that position that we were in, which was a very public summer. Her and I have been on the show since the beginning. Kyle, her, and myself are the 3 originals that have still been on since day one. And, I never ever expected or thought the beginning of the summer and then how the end of the summer would have played out. But I do believe that it was the best for us to move in different directions. But what was hard is just the public fallout of it all.
It was massive.
People were really upset and angry with me. People, they've been following and rooting and cheering for the both of us and her especially. So when that was publicly kind of changed and there was a lot of narrative that were not accurate around it, it just made it really hard. And I went into a depression and a deep sadness, but I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing coke. I tried to stick to my program. But guess what? When I was in my darkest, saddest days, I should have been going to more meetings. And I didn't. I did more virtual, turn the camera off, just listen.
Right.
Because I was so sad and so depressed, I didn't even know how to talk to a group. But it took me some time, and I had to keep working at it. And honestly, I had some very good friends of mine, Joe Schrank being one of them, who really was supportive. Other friends in the community who said, "Get out of your fucking head. It's not all about you."
Right.
And so I was like, huh? No, it is all about me, man. You know how that goes. But I started getting out of my head and started looking outward. And it's funny when you go to groups and start helping other people and service and stop thinking about your own shit for 2 seconds, you realize, actually, I'm going to be okay.
That's the medicine. That's the process, 100%.
Yeah.
And now she's going to have a baby. And
Yeah, she's moved on. And listen, I'm not allowed to talk too much about what this past summer was, but we did film another season, which is amazing. She was there, I was there, and we were cordial for the most part. So.
And that also is like a huge, to give an example to alcoholics and drug addicts that they can have fun and be sober, to show everybody that you can be sober and you can have a respectful relationship with somebody that you went through something with is another great example of recovery.
Yeah,
So it's navigating life without being an asshole for the most part.
Well, and that's what's funny is I think one thing I'll say is when I first got sober, there's the perception that you're like this reformed, all like Buddha-like person.
Right, yeah. That's how I am, but I know not everybody.
Yeah.
I know not everybody is the spiritual giant that I am. I know,
and it's like far from it. And I blame. No, I'm not blaming anybody.
Blame my dad. You can blame my father.
But I've gotten more credit than I believe I deserve. I don't live a perfect program per se. I do believe and strive to live a better life. I am an alcoholic and a major cocaine. I add terms, but I was a addict, 1,000%, and am. And I live with that, and I need to work at that. But now that you place it and you own it, I circle it, and I wrap my arms around it. And it's just giving me so much more power and freedom because I'm more myself because I take ownership of myself. And I don't know what my life would be like had I not gotten sober.
Well, luckily you don't need to know. And what about, I have to ask this too. I don't want to, but I have to ask this too. Cali sober.
Yeah.
Where are you? Because you hated weed.
I hated weed.
But you found
I hate prescription drugs. And I have anxiety and depression. I'm a candidate for Xanax or some sort of
Klonopin, Ativan, all my favorites. Valium.
Mood stable, potentially.
Yeah.
I struggle with sleep. So I had Ambien for a period of time. I was on Adderall for a period of time for my ADHD. When I got sober, I didn't use any THC, but was struggling still with sleep, was struggling with anxiety, was still struggling with some other things. I got my medical marijuana card because I had done a lot of research around ADHD and trying to help my program out. And I had met people that talk a lot about harm reduction. There are people that support THC and kind of their recovery. Now, I don't wake up and hit a bong. I don't buy street weed. I go to a medical dispensary and buy a pen, and I have tincture.
Is it the Benjamin? What is that thing?
Benjamin Button?
Yeah, is that what it is?
No, but that's a funny ass name.
Yeah.
No, it's like a very deliverable, like it's a very specific.
And how much THC are you ingesting, Carl Radke?
I don't even really know.
But is it like, are you stoned all day?
No.
I'm
not stoned right now.
And do you, because like it's funny because like for the first while we were talking about, you didn't like weed.
No. And honestly, the only thing I don't like about weed is how other people perceive it for you.
Right. You're taking it as a medication
100%.
Because you don't want to take a benzo or a stimulant.
Exactly. And I will live and die by that because I've done a lot of research in it too. Like in recovery, there is literature in AA around
100%.
If you're bipolar or have schizophrenia or have another
or
mental
anxiety
illness,
or depressed,
you're allowed to take your prescription.
Or ADHD. Like that's where it gets to this weird place where people can throw judgment because weed was demonized, but prescription pills weren't. I can have a person in my meeting who's on fucking Ativan, Adderall, Ambien, whatever.
Well, there's tons of people that are in these rooms that are doing that, but they don't raise their hand and discuss it because of how they're made to feel about it.
The stigma.
I get people that DM me all the time that say, Carl, I go to AA, but I still use THC, but it's in a healthier way. I can understand how, yes, if you're waking up and you're ripping bongs and you're smoking all day.
If you're smoking alcoholically.
And if you're...
And it's unmanageable.
If you're not managing it, if you're disassociating from your life, if you're not showing up for other people, if you're missing things... That to me is when it becomes a problem. And weed was never a problem. The only problem weed has ever been is for other people in my life.
Is it hard? Like sometimes
other people around me that don't do well with weed have an issue with me than using THC.
Well, I always say or I've learned to say
it's like the same kind of judgment thing almost.
I know I have a feeling that if I smoke weed, I would smoke it alcoholically because that's probably my what's the term? It's probably my most. It's like it's whatever. It's probably my choice. Like, and I was a person who would smoke weed all day.
Weed wasn't my drug of choice. Like hold a gun to my head, give me alcohol and Coke, and I'm good.
Is it hard to be in program? Do you keep it as a secret? Do you say it? Because like what I hear, sometimes people don't want to talk about being in therapy. Sometimes people don't want to talk about being on medication. And sometimes people are very specific about it, but usually they're like, I'm on medication for co-occurring mental situations. Yeah. Is that the way you describe it, or do you not describe it, or how do you deal with it?
Depends on the situation. It just wasn't a big part of my story, like marijuana. Like when I went out at night, I
except
drank.
The trash bag full at the Indian reservation.
Well, that was in college.
Yes, okay.
But again, even then, it was like, I don't know.
No, I love...
my relationship with it felt very different then, and then even now, the way I look at THC, I firmly believe for the person that needs it is a very viable solution and a better alternative than a laboratory-made prescription that, to my personal opinion, is abused way more than THC in a way. Like, you have Xanax and Ambien, all these amazing, but I never responded well to that. I became way more alcoholic with those things than I do with using THC.
Totally. And it's also ironic that half of the people who are probably judging you were saying legalize weed when they were using, because it's natural and it's this.
Well, it's like,
and
my other thing too is like, I know people that they can't do anything to start their day without caffeine. I don't drink caffeine. I wake up and I'm good.
Listen.
So like, what the fuck, right?
But I feel like...
So, like, how is that, like anything?
Or sugar or anything.
Or people sit there and they say they're sober all day, but they rip 15 cups of coffee all day.
I think that's a stretch.
10 cups.
I think it's a stretch. No, not how much cups of coffee.
No,
I think comparing caffeine with weed is a stretch, but comparing...
But I think substance-wise, like if someone in their life, whether it's drinking tea in the morning or drinking a cup of coffee,
habitual use,
or dropping a THC 4 milligram tincture into their beverage and then living a very productive, well-focused life.
Totally. I remember I was waiting tables and I was sober. I was sober. I was doing nothing, right? But there was a guy there who was like a fitness freak, and he had this pre-workout, and I would be 12-hour days, and he'd be like, you want to try this pre-workout? And I never worked out in my life. I never took pre-workouts or anything. It's like, all right. And he gives me this pre-workout. I swear to God, it was like stronger than the best Coke I ever did.
I don't like the pre-workouts too much.
And how do you say you're sober? I'm flying around the restaurant, sober. But so it's like everyone has their way of describing whatever. But I love the way you describe THC. And I think that people will benefit. And I think people who judge, if THC isn't for you, don't do it.
Totally. That's what it bugs me because I get a lot of shit for it. And it's fine being kind of on the front lines of it. But I saw recently Jelly Roll, the country music artist. Sure.
Future Dopey guest Jelly Roll.
He's crushed his musical career. And it was actually, he's a great inspiring story because of what he's been through. But he has a headline in page 6, I'll send it to you. It said, marijuana saved my life and keeps me sober.
Right.
So I understand, and there's a lot of, I think, polarization in Alcoholics Anonymous or in some of these rooms, and I get that, but I hope as the world evolves, social media evolves, and we understand ourselves a little bit better, being more welcoming and supporting of all of your recovery and your sobriety journey. I would never, ever judge anyone who said they're sober and then occasionally takes a Xanax to take the edge off so they can get a better night's sleep. That doesn't bother me. But I understand where that slippery slope can be. And then I'm in a position of influence and being on a platform. People look to me and they're like, oh, well, he's doing that or he can do that. But I'm not a fucking doctor. I'm not a therapist. I don't have it all figured out. I just know that alcohol, Molly, ecstasy, Xanax, Vyvanse, Ambien almost fucking killed me.
Right.
Marijuana was never a problem and didn't almost fucking kill me. So I have a healthy relationship there, and I still partake in it sometimes, and it helps my life.
I listen. I think I'm with you. Smoke them if you got them. And I
But I don't even smoke it. That's what, like, I
I'm
have
just
like
playing.
these. It's just like when people have this perception of it, it really bugs me because it's, if you flipped it on its side and looked at it like from something else in someone's life, it would piss people off too if you like framed it the way it's framed towards me.
I get it.
It's just, oh, it's weed. You smoke weed. It's like, no, I'm not, like, I don't wake and bake with a bong and like I'm not showing up to work like.
You've been demonized for it publicly
Big
as
time.
well, and that's not the story. The story is you take it medicinally, and you don't, and you're not smoking. You're fucking.
I don't. I even get offered joints sometimes at parties, and sometimes I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't care. Like, I don't want that.
No, I get it,
Yeah.
and I think
'Cause
that
I want a very specific THC delivery of what it's doing for me. I want a sativa, which is more as a certain property to it. I want a certain flavor because it tastes for me and what I'm looking for in my day.
What's the flavor?
Strawberry.
What's the strain?
Cough.
Strawberry cough.
It's the best strain in the world.
Strawberry cough. All right. Before we go, you've been very generous. I would feel like an asshole if we didn't talk about Soft Bar for a second.
Let's do it.
What's up with Soft Bar?
So, well, over the last 6 years, Kyle Cook and his wife Amanda, we launched an alcohol brand
Called Loverboy. Yes.
And during that journey, Kyle was the founder and CEO, and Amanda was the creative director and the visual person and all these amazing creative designs. And I was kind of the sales guy in the relationship. We built a really cool thing. I kind of rode Kyle and Amanda's, tail a bit and helping them there, but at the same time realizing I struggled with my alcohol. So it took a little bit, but I did take a step back from the company. But we developed a non-alcoholic Loverboy last year.
Which will be at DopeyCon too.
Shout out to DopeyCon. I'll be there. And Loverboy non-alc will be there. But during that journey of non-alcoholic Loverboy, I started selling into retail shops and stores here in New York. One of them that looks like a wine shop, feels like a liquor store, but everything in there is non-alcoholic product. I went in there. They started selling Loverboy non-alc there. I happened to stop in a couple weeks later. I walk in, I look around, and I'm like, this is fucking weird. Why am I going home right now? Why can't I sit down here and have a non-alcoholic beverage? Then you walk down the street, you pass a coffee shop. They don't have good non-alcoholic beverages other than coffee or Topo Chico. You go to a bar at 4 o'clock, they don't have good coffee, and they have Heineken Zero, and that's it. Where do I hang out in New York as someone who doesn't drink alcohol? Starbucks? No. So I just had this this deep yearning of looking at this industry and where we're at and going, how is there not a bar and cafe for mindful consumption?
And you love socializing.
I still love being social. I still love networking. I still love going out. I still love eating. I still love drinking all the beverages that just don't have alcohol.
Right.
When I'm at a cafe, you'll see anywhere from an orange juice, sparkling water, a water, to a tea or whatever cool non-alcoholic drink they have. I'll have 5 drinks with me at a table. That's where I'm living. I'm loving life.
Right.
So Soft Bar was a dream and vision of mine and a team of people I put together. And we're developing and building, what we describe as a mindful consumption bar and cafe. It's Brooklyn's first, in our opinion, but
Williamsburg?
Williamsburg. So
When does it open?
hopefully early next year.
Very exciting.
So we're eyeing up a dry January event. Stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll be in our space, but the space may not be ready just yet for that in January.
Maybe we could do some dopey stuff over there.
Always down.
All right, Carl, thank you for coming to my dad's luxurious elderly Jewish apartment, and thank you for giving us so much time. It's so cool.
Thank you, Dave.
It was
I appreciate
fun, right?
it. No, this is great.
You feel good?
Yeah. No, I feel good. I feel like I just shared my entire life story.
How does it feel? You feel like a load is off?
Load is off.
You did good, man. I appreciate
Thank you.
you. Thank you.